Welcome to Every Child Belongs. I'm Kim Botto, an adoptive mom, grandma, an advocate for kids and teens with disabilities, as well as a longtime leader of kids and student ministries. In this show, we explore how we can create spaces where every child feels heard and valued, whether neurodivergent, differently abled, or they've experienced trauma. Every child belongs. We'll hear from educators, parents, professionals, and more, finding practical ideas that help build a compassionate and supportive world for every child. Let's get started. Today is a very special day because I have my very dear, good friend, Bethany Robertson, on with me. And Bethany and I worked together for years. Bethany, did I hire you or did somebody else hire you? I can't remember.
Jason hired me.
Okay, so you were in my umbrella, but Bethany and I are an example of you can work with somebody, you can still be very good friends, and we no longer work together, but we are still good friends. And Bethany is one of the best kids pastors I know. She's the kids pastor at Vineyard Cincinnati. And Bethany, I just want you to know, as far as this podcast is all about Every Child Belongs, I refer to stuff that you have taught me all the time.
Oh, thanks, Kim.
You do an incredible job at that, incredible at building up volunteers. So it's not just you that's doing that. It's the rest of your team too. But Bethany isn't all work. She also has 5 adorable, precious children, a husband who I also love. And she likes to do all kinds of fun stuff. She lives in a really fun neighborhood, the great community around her. But Bethany, what would you like people to know about you?
Yeah, those are good. I love when people ask what kind of hobbies I have. I'm like, my hobbies are parenting, doing the dishes. Laundry is a great one. But I guess I would also say I love to learn. I used to just tell people like, oh, I love to read. And I think I love to read because I love to learn. I love to learn new perspectives. And I love to dive into people's stories with them. I think that's the other side of it that I like a lot.
Yeah, you are a deep thinker. You ask deep questions. And I appreciate that most of the time from you.
Yeah, it's sometimes a little squirmy.
Not every minute, but most of the time. But so on this podcast, we talk about Every Child Belongs. And, was there anything else you wanted to say about yourself?
No.
Yeah, your hobbies are keeping your 5 children alive. And you're doing that beautifully, not just keeping them alive. They are thriving and doing well and having all the normal stuff that kids do. And you're navigating those things with them. So this podcast is all about Every Child Belongs. And in order for us to be a place where every child belongs, we have to be a place where kids can bring their hard stories. Mm-hmm. And just so everybody knows, I've talked to Bethany about this ahead of time. And so I'm not just springing this on her. But Bethany, you've had some really hard times in your life.
Yeah.
So would you mind just kind of telling us about that? And then let's talk about how people supported you and your kids and helped you feel like you belonged.
Yeah. So Christmas of 2017, I had 4 kids at the time, was married to my husband, James. We'd gotten married in college. So, whole life was kind of around this family and this experience. And Christmas Eve of 2017, I woke up in the middle of the night, just kind of that feeling of something's wrong, and discovered that James was not breathing, and called the squad, called his parents, just knowing like whatever wrong thing has happened, I'm about to need some help here. Mm-hmm. And he had died of a heart attack in his sleep at 36, things that you don't expect to find out. And it was a really, really hard night. It was probably around 2 or 3 in the morning, so I kind of had until sunup to figure out how I'm going to tell the kids. Because for all of the hard that it was for me, having worked with kids for so long, I knew that it impossibly hard for them, that this was going to be a before and an after for them, that I was going to introduce them to their after some way. So I remember just kind of laying on the couch, police officers in my house. I realized I was probably a suspect. That was an interesting reflection later.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I did not even think of that.
Yeah. And I was, I'm trying to figure out, like, what is this officer? Like, what is he doing? Does he want some coffee? Like, I'm trying to offer him, like, drinks. Like, why is he still in my house? But thinking through, like, how am I going to pay the mortgage? What does that do? I don't even know. And thinking, how am I going to tell the kids? And trying to remember anything I'd ever learned about kids and trauma or kids and, any tool that I had, I'm trying to pull out, and everything just felt so fuzzy. Like, what am I going to do? And so I remember hearing the kids start to wake up one by one upstairs. So, like, you hear their little feet hit the floor and, like, coming downstairs. At the time, my oldest was 7. And my youngest was 1. So my 7-year-old came downstairs first and sees me and his grandparents, and his first question was, "Where's Dad?" So I had to tell him, like, last night while you were sleeping, Dad died. And just be with him as he processed, and then did it 2 more times in a row, as the kids who were old enough to, like, really be able to talk woke up, and we had to sit and hold that together.
I still can't imagine. So it's now Christmas Eve. You have 4 kids, ages 1 to 7. How did you get support? What was helpful to you in that?
Yeah. So I kind of recognized I was about to, like, this sounds bad, but, like, when something bad happens, like, I know I'm about to call and ruin lots of people's days. And it's Christmas Eve. This isn't what anyone would ever want to hear ever, and especially not today. And I also knew I only had space and capacity for so much bad news sharing. So I kind of picked somebody in, like, each important circle and asked them to start telling others, because I knew people would want to know. James was very, very well loved, had tons and tons of close friends, people who would say that he was central to them. And I remember some of those phone calls. Like, one was to one of James's oldest friends, and she just kind of went, "No, like, that's not true." No, unfortunately, it is true. I called Lauren, I called Kristen, and I called John from our small group. Pretty sure I called my parents at some point, and then just kind of had to react. And Kim, I know that you don't want to be the hero of this story, but I tell this part of the story a lot. No, I know you're not the hero, but Kim, I feel like you called me within, like, an hour of those first calls going out. You had probably heard from Kristen. And you just said, "What can I do? Is there anything I can do?" And, like, there was, I feel like the whole world is crumbling. And the night before, we had a family Christmas celebration and gotten a pack of Magna tiles for these 4 kids. And a pack is like 36 Magna tiles. And so I was like, "Well, they're fighting over Magna tiles a lot. Can you bring me some more Magna tiles?" And so you went to Target on Christmas Eve, which is really the apex of love.
That's
I mean,
right.
I don't know if I could ever feel more loved than that. And you, I think, bought them out of Magna tiles.
I did.
And you showed up at my house with Magna tiles, and we still have them out. They're one of the only toys that they all still play with all these years later.
Oh, I hope you feel loved when you see them scattered on your floor.
Oh my gosh, yes. So you came, you brought Magna tiles, and you were a very welcome presence because you were so focused on the kids too. I felt like so many people, I mean, of course you have emotion when you hear this kind of bad news. Like,
Right.
I felt like so many people came in to like drop something off or to give us a hug, and they came bringing their emotion, which again, of course, it's a very human response. And I felt like you and your emotion communicated like joy to see the kids,
Aw.
more than you communicated like, oh, what a hard thing, if that makes sense. That you were willing to be present with them in however they were coping. With Lydia, who was 5 at the time, she was drawing on her chalkboard, like, guess what this is? And it was like, it's a unicorn dancing in a field of strawberries, and there are diamonds falling from the sky, and the song is Jingle Bells. Like, I mean, you're never going to guess it.
Yes. But
But
I
I mean,
tried. I
you
tried.
tried really hard. And that night, so I mean, it's maybe 5 or 6 at night, so it's been less than 24 hours, and like we're laughing on the couch with Lydia, and I was like, gosh,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have guessed we'd laugh again. But because you were willing to put Lydia first, it helped a whole lot. And there were some helpful things and some not helpful things. There's someone else who came over
Sure.
who said that in her family, everyone just comes and sits with the grieving person. And so someone who I wouldn't have put into a close circle just sat at my house most of the day. It's like, oh,
Oh, wow.
this is how her family does this. Like, I had thankfully some grace to process that. Another friend came and she knew both of us, and I said, will you please ask her to go away? Like, I don't want her in my house anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I had friends who were willing to come and tell others to leave. And I mean, just, it was a hard first day for sure, but it's definitely not where the support stopped either.
Well, it's a hard thing to know if you should come or should you not. Because truthfully, I didn't know if I should even call you. And I talked to a mutual friend who's like, what are you talking about? Yeah, call her. But I think it's equally important to read the room. It's also okay. I know I asked you a couple times, like, do you want me to leave? Like, should I leave now? I think we can get caught up on, I think of some, because I didn't do it perfectly, but we were close enough. You could say, look, for real, go now, weeks later. But how do people gauge which they should do then?
I mean, I think it's it's tender, right? Like, it's a really tender moment. Nothing is ever the right thing to say perfectly. Nothing is ever perfectly the right thing to do. But I think for like the person offering, it can be really good if you do some self-reflection first and think like, have we like shared confidences in the past? Have we been in each other's home before? That could be a good question to ask before you want to pick up the phone and call. I think that there were some people that day where they were reaching out, and even part of me was like, how did you even get my phone number? Like, we talked once in a professional setting. Like, we're not intimate acquaintances. Like, I wouldn't want to receive support from you today. But there were others where I was so grateful to have those reach outs and to be able to say yes or no.
Right. So what were the most, because it wasn't just that day, it was long-term support and community that you needed. And I know a lot of people have asked me since then, so how did you do it? What worked well? What didn't? So you tell me, what was helpful? What wasn't?
Yeah, I don't know if this is the kids ministry side of me, but I started by making lists. For anyone who's in kids ministry and you've recruited volunteers for years, you go, okay, well, what are these people good at? And how can they help? And I think that was all of my training coming out. But I just kind of started to compile like lists of people who had said like, I would love to help with anything. And went, okay, well, what kind of help would I like from some of these people? And also, what am I most nervous or scared about? For me, I was so scared of putting my kids to bed by myself every night. At the time, James was in like this boxing group. And so like one night a week, he wasn't there for bedtime. And oh my gosh, it was such a hard night every week. And I'm like, is every night of my life going to feel like Tuesday? I can't do that. And so I had a list of like maybe 8 or 10 ladies who I trusted to put my kids to bed. So I had a bedtime crew who would come and just help read stories, help make sure everyone had their jammies on, had their teeth brushed. And I mean, it's a small thing, but it's a big thing because it took away some of that fear. I think I had a meal train through May. Like we had meals constantly. I wasn't thinking about that as much. What else was I nervous about? Oh, I was nervous about Sundays, working and having 4 small kids, knowing that like I knew I didn't have to go to church that Sunday, but beyond that, like Sunday was always going to come. And had a close friend who said, I will watch your kids every single Sunday, like every time that you work. And so her family and my family became like this one enormous family that would show up at church every Sunday. And it was so precious and exactly what I needed in order to be able to carry forward stuff that I decided was important.
Yeah, because at that time you were working. We had 3 Sunday morning services, and your kids were at the ages, they could not be expected to be at church for 3 services, especially when you came so early and so late.
Right.
So that's good. I think the question, what's the best way then to ask somebody the question to determine what are you afraid of or what are you most concerned about? What should we ask?
I'm trying to think. I feel like it could be what feels the hardest to you right now? Because I think that fear might be harder to talk about sometimes, but difficulty can be easier to talk about. Just even thinking about like, if the fear is I'm not going to be able to provide for my family, you might say, oh, I need some help with groceries before you say, I'm worried that I won't be able to provide.
Yeah, because when you say what seems difficult, so what you said, what seems difficult, that's much more, like you can hold on to that. That's a tangible thing.
Right.
Yeah, where fear is big. That is great. So what's difficult? What feels difficult right now? That's a question. What else? What are some other things?
I also appreciated people who took initiative, whether it was exactly what I would have picked or not. I think one of the ones that was most touching to me, the day of the funeral was so hard. I mean, you have to like really acknowledge like this is really happening. There's no going back. And I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but like there was some finality to it. And there were people who came to the funeral who I didn't know, you know, James's coworkers, people like that. And some of the people who I think were most touching were some of the parents of the kids I'd been supporting at church, especially the ones I had volunteered with before. So we had known each other for a long time and walked through some difficult things from the other side where, you know, people are dropping off meals. When you've got a bunch of little kids, they don't eat meals in the first place. Like, there's nothing that everyone will eat, nothing that everyone likes. And so I had, like, gotten into the habit of dropping off snacks to families who were going through hard times. And this mom brought me this bag of snacks. I had dropped some off on her doorstep a few years before. And she was like, I learned from you
Oh, wow.
that kids will just eat snacks. So here's some snacks for your kids. And that was one of those where it was like, even in the midst of that hard time, I felt so loved and so cared for by her initiative to go, I don't know what your kids' favorite snacks are, but here's a selection. And I have to be honest, I think the kids ate some of those snacks on the way home from the funeral. Like, they want some fruit snacks. I don't know.
Right,
They're
right.
little kids.
It was a long day.
Yes.
It was a long day. So talking about the kids, how can we support a family going through it? Like, saying it's a hard time seems to even minimize it. I don't know what, I mean, but how can we support the kids and the family?
Yeah, I really valued the presence of safe adults in the kids' lives. And I think that it probably looks different in each circumstance. Like for me, my kids were all young enough that our close community was community that was going to support each of them. Versus if they were teenagers, they'd have been a little bit more divergent in their paths, if that makes sense. So people who were safe adults, people that the kids trusted, people who had already built relationships with the kids who were able to continue to build into them, were so key in that time. For example, Michael was taking karate lessons, and a group of guys committed to driving Michael to karate lessons. And the person who did it the most was Michael's godfather. So they already knew each other. They already cared about each other. And I was like, gosh, I just want somebody else to ask, how was your day at school? And listen to all of the like ups and downs and favorite Pokemon. And you know what I mean? The things that are important to kids, because when I became a single parent, it was like, I only have so much capacity to hear all of these little joys and challenges. And if I used to be able to, kind of tag out, like feeling overwhelmed. Everyone wants to talk to me. Everyone wants to touch me at the same time. And then it was, oh, I don't have an outlet. But when people spent time with the kids and were able to kind of pour into them, like fill their buckets, that was really key for me. Whether they were coming over for dinner and doing that in the midst of all of us, whether it was taking one kid out at a time or the whole group, all of those moments were my favorites.
If you're loving today's conversation and want to dive even deeper into creating spaces where every child belongs, check out my book, Boundless Hope. It's packed with practical tools, real stories, and powerful insights to help you make a difference. Get yours today. Just head to kimbotto.com or Amazon to order now. I was so honored to be on Team Tuck-In. So I got to put the kids to bed, which was awesome. The thing that I was surprised about were some people would, and you alluded to it earlier, would want to do things that just weren't a good fit. Like somebody who didn't know the kids would say, well, I want to be on Team Tuck-In too, which that's such an intimate time. And I think one thing you did that was really smart is you identified a couple people, and you would, if someone came and said they wanted to volunteer for something, rather than you have to manage all that, you sent them to these other people, and then they could say, hey, you know what? Team Tuck-In is good. We've got people who have long relationships with them, but we really could use somebody to drop off groceries every Saturday morning. So I think not taking that, you've got enough to do in that, and just giving that responsibility to somebody else. That seemed like that worked well for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can't overstate the blessing that it was to have people who I trusted that much, who I knew were competent, and who I knew would take good care of the people offering as well. Our friend Kristen, she's definitely a mutual friend. She's just
best organizer.
Oh, she's the best organizer. She's incredible in every kind of way. And so I think that I made those initial lists, and then I'd be, this is Jane, and Jane goes to once is offering but doesn't really mean it. Sorry, Jane, you don't really exist.
Yes.
But
Yes.
Or Jane goes to general help at times. We'll send an email to everyone. So I was able to just identify what circle they were in for me. And then I knew that Kristen was going to get them taken care of.
Yes. And another thing that Kristen did, she's not just an organizer, she's an amazing pastor and carer of people. But, initially so many people ask, and there really weren't enough needs for everybody to have something to do. So knowing that this was going to be, you were going to need support for a long time, she kept a list. And then I remember in the spring, an email went out to the people on the list and said, we're having a landscaping day, or we want to clean up the backyard.
Mm-hmm.
And so continued to get people involved for a long period, because I think when they ask initially, they really do want to help. But if there's nothing to do, then sometimes they just forget about it. And they would love, like the people that she asked 3, 4, 5 months later were thrilled to be asked and to do it.
Okay.
But had she not had that list, so that's something I always tell people, keep a list of the people who are volunteering with their contact information and find out what they really love to do. Have an idea. Yeah, we're going to need yard work in the spring. That the house is going to need painted in the fall, like things like that. And then you can go back to those people. So let's go back to the kids. Are there other things that you saw, like even outside of the home?
Yeah. I felt like my kids had like almost like secret trauma that they had gone through, because we still looked really normal on the outside. And especially if people like work in like a church or a school, and like you can kind of see like a family walking in and you're like, whew, I'm getting a doozy. Maybe we looked like a doozy actually, but I thought we looked normal. And so like the kids' teachers needed to give them extra space and extra support, especially a couple months later. I remember it was probably like March or April, still a little cold outside, but moving towards spring. Like, I mean, there were just days that my oldest would just like scream through the school day. I mean, just was not handling things well, and needed to sometimes be like put in a room with the school psychologist, who he ended up developing a close relationship with. Or at church, they used to kind of show up like you would hope kids would, right? Like they're engaged, they're answering questions, they're sitting with the group, and sometimes they needed to be like in the back, one-on-one with someone, instead of right in the mix of everything. Their needs just really shifted, and we needed people who were able to shift with them, if that makes sense. Gosh, even at the funeral for Michael, my oldest, he found one of the teen volunteers from his classroom who was there every week. I don't even know how old this kid was at the time, 15 or 16. Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't come and sit with us until his friend came and sat with us too.
Yes.
So this teenager from another family sat in our family row at the funeral because he knew that Michael needed him. And so that was exactly who he looked for every Sunday after that. In order to, like, they had this shared experience. Michael knew that he knew, and he wasn't going to have to share the hard story again, all over again. I know that the kids sometimes would say, like, playing at the park or playing on the playground, they would say, like, it feels weird because we know that our dad died and nobody else knows that. And I don't know if I should tell people or not. So kind of had to talk with them through who's a safe person to tell, like what's a safe relationship to share that in. Maybe you don't want to just tell kids on the playground who you're not going to see again. But you might want to tell your close friends who are going to care about you for a long time. I mean, they really struggled with feeling different and feeling like they weren't the same as who they used to be.
Yeah, kids don't want to be different. And I think this is a great example that it's not just disability or a different wiring of the brain. You can have an event that happens in your life that just, it throws them off, and they kind of don't know what their foundation is. Were there things, while still protecting your kids' stories, but were there things that surprised you with your children?
I would say that I have continued to be surprised. I mean, it's been 7 years now.
Uh-huh.
I wanted my kids to take the lead in how they grieved. And I was surprised at the different ways that they grieved, the different things that they needed, and how it's transformed over time. Even still, it'll be coming up on the anniversary of their dad's death, and I'll ask them, how would you like to remember him this year? And now we're kind of getting into where we have traditions. So they'll go, oh, well, we'd like to go to the cemetery. We'd like to bring a snack. Normally, whatever we had for Christmas Eve breakfast, we'll bring a plate. Things like that, where they just have had different expressions of grief, and I've needed to be able to adapt myself over time to what they needed versus what I might expect. One of my girls, long past when I would have expected it, still wants to be tucked in every night. And, you know, sometimes as a parent, you get really tired and you're like, sometimes I just want to go to bed. Like, why do you really need me to tuck you in?
Right.
And she said, I'm always worried something bad's going to happen to you while I'm sleeping. So I need to see you before I go to sleep so that I know that you're okay. It's like, all right, I'll keep tucking you in.
Yes.
But being able to be responsive to that has been the biggest thing, and I've been surprised at what they still need.
Just a reminder to us that grief is a long-term process, and it does change. I think you now have empathy and understanding for what other kids are going through, that those us who haven't experienced I think devastating loss like you did, can't. What do we need to know to be better equipped to just welcome, receive, and support a kid going through something like that?
Gosh, well, I feel like something that you taught me, Kim, is that the beginning, the first 24 to 48 hours is really, really important for families. So if I think about ways that I've supported other families, there's a family at church where it was a little bit of a different story, but mom and 2 kids now, and dad died very suddenly this summer. And we were setting up for a conference. I mean, it was enormous, like just incredible amounts of work. And got a message that the mom was coming in for her funeral meeting. And I was like, I have to go. Like, I have to be there. It's just day 2, I think. And I just need her to know that, like, she and her kids will have support for a long time. And so even though I wasn't in charge of the funeral, I didn't run it, I didn't have to officiate it, there was nothing that I had to specifically do. I felt like offering my presence made a difference. And I think that when you're welcoming kids into a space, letting people know, I know what happened. You don't have to tell me your story again. I know that something happened, and I'm really glad that you're here. Not necessarily, how are you? Not asking them to offer something back, but being somebody who's glad to see them, someone who can empathize with them and connect with them is so important.
So I think that's really important. Like, don't ask them how they are when you know they've just had this incredible loss, to make them try to come up with words for it. But what would be a good thing to say? Like you said, I know what happened. I guess maybe, is that just enough? I know what happened, and I'm glad you're here.
I think so. I mean, I would have to ask the kids who I said that to if that made a difference. But yeah, I mean, rather than sugarcoating it, rather than pretending it didn't happen, or rather than saying, oh, do you want to talk about it? Maybe they don't. Like, they just need to be kids sometimes. And so for this family in particular, I helped the other volunteers understand what had happened, so that they would be able to treat the kids with some tenderness. And from there, it was just, how are they today? Like, it is day by day, right? Like, some days are good, some days are hard. It's true for kids as it is for adults. Anyone who's grieved, you know that sometimes you think you're getting better, and then something triggers it, and you're crying in the parking lot again, and you
Right.
didn't even see it coming.
Right. I have not used that, but I'm going to start using that. Just, I know what happened. I think we feel like we need to explain more what we're talking about when we say it. But a kid who's just gone through something like that, they know exactly what you're talking about. It's on the front of their mind. So that's all we need is, I know what happened. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
Let me know what you need. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want people to know?
Wow. I feel like if I think about it, that idea that kids are resilient, that I know that you also like to debunk, that actually kids are not particularly resilient. None of us really are outside of getting the support that we need. Kids who get support and have someone to walk with them through a difficult time will get to the other side and they're going to be okay. Gosh, they can't do it on their own. None of us can do this on our own. So to be able to be willing to ask for help is so helpful. And even if they can't yet, letting kids know that they're not alone so that they have someone to turn to when they need some help is so great. Something that touched me so much this year, again with this family church, my kids are now old enough that they're volunteering in kids ministry of their own free will, I'd like to say. Sometimes our family does not serve out of free will, but they really enjoy it. And they were noticing that one of the kids in this family was just having a hard time, like just not engaging very much, sometimes not listening, those kinds of things. And I said to my kids who were volunteering, I said, do you remember what it felt like and how hard it was? And they kind of both had like this light bulb moment and went, yeah, that was really hard. And the next Sunday, we got to go. Come on, we got to go. And Michael was down in his room getting together different things that had helped him, that people had gotten him after his dad died. And one was like a backpack where he kept special memories and things that he'd carry around just to have something tactile to grab onto. And he took those special things out, but passed his backpack down to one of the kids who had just had a loss.
Oh.
And he sat there with him and said, I know what it feels like. It's not fair, and you're always going to miss your dad. But maybe you can carry some things that remind you of your dad.
Oh, wow.
I know, I'm like crying. And just to see what that meant, I think, for Michael on his healing journey, that he doesn't have to hang on to this thing that he needed when he was 7, 8, and 9. Now as a teenager, he can turn and pass it to a kid who might need it more.
Oh.
So they're going to be okay. They just need our help.
I mean, it doesn't surprise me that he did this. You should know it's because of the stable, loving environment that you created for him, and you let him grieve
Thank you.
however he needed to grieve. And you surrounded him with people. I mean, one mom with 4 kids, ages 1 through 7, you recognize I'm going to need other people. And oh my gosh, that's like, oh, sweet Michael. But that's what we want, isn't it? We want kids to be able to use the hard parts in their story to then help other people. It doesn't make that hard part any less hard. But it's like, oh, God does use these things for good.
Right.
I am able to talk to this kid in a way that most of the kids aren't going to be able to talk to him.
So another thing that I would mention that helped our family so much was a local organization called Fernside. And Fernside here in Cincinnati is grief support for kids. One of the most incredible volunteer organizations I've ever seen. They do something like 60 hours of volunteer training before you get to volunteer, and they have a multi-year waiting list of people who want to help.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, just people who have been so touched by the organization in the past or people who want to make a difference for kids. But it's grief support groups for kids, all led by volunteers. And kids get to do different activities to help process their grief. And it was one of the only places where my kids felt like they weren't different because every kid there had experienced loss. I wish there was a Fernside everywhere, but I bet that there are other places like that in other places in the country. It was one of the most beneficial and helpful things we experienced.
Well, I really appreciate, I know this brings up all kind of emotion in you talking about it. Obviously, it's bringing up some emotion in me. I'm not minimizing. Yeah.
It's okay. It's the connection hand.
Yeah. But thank you. And I want to get you back on here sometime and talk about all your kids ministry stuff. Amazing. Because you worked with people with disabilities for years before you came into ministry, and you have all kinds of great tips and tricks. So we will do that. But this feels like a hard pivot. But Bethany, we end with kind of rapid fire questions.
Great. Rapid fire question away.
Do you want to take a deep breath and then get ready? You ready for this?
No, I think I'll just, hold my breath, stay tense. Good times.
Oh. No, Bethany. Should we do a little breathing exercise? Should we do a breathing exercise together?
Volcano breath.
That's right. Bethany knows all the breathing exercises we use with kids. Okay, here we'll start with, here's one. Bethany, what is your favorite dream vacation?
Traveling to lots of places that I haven't seen all at once with my family so that we can experience different cultures and feelings together.
Which you do that. I'm some of the trips you take with 5 children, amazing.
We're trying. We haven't traveled internationally yet, but we're trying to build our muscles for it.
Do you have a trip planned for the summer?
Yeah, we're hoping to go to Puerto Rico.
Nice.
It's a good muscle builder. Still in America, but we're going to have a language barrier and we're going to try new things.
Yep. Great. That sounds fun. What is your favorite way to encourage a child?
My favorite way is to notice them deeply and call out something special that they bring to the group. Our community is better because everyone's in it.
Yes, it is. What's your most memorable gift from your childhood?
Probably whole sets of books. I loved reading as a kid.
Yes.
And so thinking about like my Laura Ingalls Wilder books or all of the Madeleine L'Engle books or all of the book sets that I would get obsessed with at different times.
You read Laura Ingalls Wilder. Of course you did.
Oh, yeah. I was Laura Ingalls Wilder for Halloween when I was in 3rd grade.
Of course you were. Of course you would be a character from a book. My granddaughter, who is in 2nd grade and she's spending the night with us, we read Little House on the Prairie last night. I forgot how good it is. It's so good.
Yeah, I feel like Laura Ingalls Wilder remembered what it was like to be a kid.
Yeah.
So when she wrote for kids, she captures their imagination well.
Yeah. Really good. Okay, this is the last one. You're going to finish this thought. Every child
is loved.
Yes. Thank you, Bethany. It's always fun to spend time with you. I prefer spending time in person. I prefer it when we spend time in person on the beach. That was super fun. We need to schedule a beach trip again, Bethany. But yes, we'll do that. We won't do that here. We'll do that after.
That sounds good.
As we close, what encouragement do you have for the people who are listening?
I would say if you're working with kids and you're encountering a kid who's gone through some tragedy, you might know some of it, you might not know all of it. Just to know that your presence matters so much to that kid, that you don't need to know all the right things to do or all the right things to say. You don't need to take a class on it, but you need to show that kid that they matter to you, that you love them, and that you're going to stick with them even when it gets hard. I think that's what you can bring to the table that'll make the biggest difference.
Yes, I agree. We don't need to do fancy stuff or come up with fancy words.
Right.
Just sitting there on the floor playing Magnetiles or playing some goofy game about dancing unicorns in the rain. Well, Bethany, thank you so much. I really appreciate you. I appreciate what you do to create spaces for every kid to belong. And just thank you for sharing about your life.
Yeah. Thanks for teaching me everything that I know, Kim. I can't wait for my autographed book to arrive.
I do not teach you. Oh my gosh, you're so funny. Yeah. Well, you guys, Bethany, everybody needs a friend like Bethany, even though Bethany is actually the age of my children, which is so you can have friends that aren't your age too. They make you younger. Thank you, Bethany. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining me today on Every Child Belongs. If you found today's episode helpful, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. And don't forget to share this with a friend who might need to hear it. Together, we can create a world where every child belongs.